And welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, and the Dadley boys of WhatCulture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick. And gents, we are gathered here today to talk about the future of wrestling and how wrestling will forever change this year. I'm going to try and transport us into the future where hopefully the current global situation has hopefully try and kind of resolved itself somewhat so we can return to normality. And I want to know how you think things are going to change once that happens. And I suppose we should start off by talking about WWE and Vince McMahon. A lot of discussion on him after he was on SmackDown recently. Michael Hamflett, is there any chance Vince might relinquish some power?
No, absolutely not. These global circumstances have been tough on wrestling and tough on us all, not least because it's taken away the XFL. There was this one sliver of hope that in his later years, him and his Alpha Entertainment Incorporated that he set up would finally be dragged away from wrestling earlier than we would have expected to run his footballer. Yes, it's Vince. Of course, he wasn't going to ever not keep a hand in with WWE, but already his absence from television tapings and missing out on certain big meetings that we'd heard and read about at least implied that he had to concentrate some of his efforts on the football and not all of them on the wrestling. And the rise to power of Paul Heyman and the continued involvement of a Bruce Pritchard or a Jeff Jarrett or those other people you're seeing Gorilla on WWE 24 special just gave the idea that there was going to be a Vinceless future like sooner than we thought. And then SmackDown on Friday night was the harshest reminder. This is a man who has somehow retained the memory of odd, bad angles like the Gobbledygook or Bailey, This Is Your Life, as if to imply that he knows the difference between a bad one and a good one still and wants to keep trying producing good ones despite what we see every week on television. My fear is that without the distraction that he pumped millions into, that he sold loads of his shares to do, now just whipped away like a tablecloth in a magician's act, we're going to get even more Vince than we would have had he even not had a football league to concentrate on. There'll be a little fury within him that he's lost that, and he's going to think, right, well, I'm going to have more of a go at this then. The likes of Triple H and people that thought they were getting a hand on the wheel are going to be even more frustrated at just how involved he gets.
Yes, I have to echo that sentiment. I mean, at the end of the day, it is Vince, and he is indeed, in fact, always going to Vince, and I think he can even justify despite these tumbling TV ratings, and there will be increased scrutiny if, in fact, this carries over into the quarter two results, because they're going to be nowhere near as good. Well, there will be, because the TV money is sort of the coverall that blankets everything in sort of golden riches, but they still won't be quite as good because they're missing out on revenue streams such as the live pay-per-view gates and the TV tapings, etc. But Vince McMahon is, for whatever reason, obviously they're not doing their research, is considered the one constant of WWE's quality. It's considered among the market that there'll be a period of incredible uncertainty and turbulence were he to step down. He is as reassuring a presence for investors as he is a gigantic boil on our bell ends as fans. So with that in mind, he's got even more power now and even more of an excuse to wield it and to shield himself and to just retain influence that realistically no one could dare dream of prizing away from him anyway. Yeah, he's got this in the bag. The only thing that could realistically topple him at this point is a huge loads of them test positive and the worst happened scandal. But even then, he's proved himself Teflon to absolutely everything.
I anticipate that you two are probably going to answer that way. Is there any way that we see a sort of, at least a transition? Because like you said, it's going to be such a shock to the system, despite what we're all hoping for when Vince eventually steps away, or should the worst happen to him. Is there any way, we see a sort of transition so they can try and adapt to that by bringing, Triple H arguably maybe more into the decision-making process for the main roster, considering what he's done in NXT, on the positive side, at least. And could it be the fact that the catalyst for all this perhaps is, as you mentioned there, Sid, the dwindling TV figures? Obviously, they are kind of a product of their time, and it's anticipated that they will maybe not return to normal, but won't be as bad as they are right now once this whole situation changes and people aren't so obsessed with the NFL draft or, of course, TV news. Could that be the catalyst for change, or is it literally just going to be remain as it is, I suppose?
Yeah, it's going to remain as it is. If anything, I can't see it being a catalyst for change, because if you look at where Triple H is specifically on the corporate ladder of that company, he had a demotion before all of this kicked off. I think Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, whose work you should check out. You need to follow him on Twitter if you're a fan of ours. We delve into the creative side. He's just an expert on the business side. He was wary of designating it a demotion, and he said it might just be too much of a temptation to fold it into a cynical narrative, I think was his terminology. But ultimately, the word creative is no longer his job title, even if it was in the copy, still in his remit. But if you're looking at the numbers NXT's been doing on the USA Network, particularly in the demo, the last few weeks, they haven't even been cracking the top 50 of the money demo. The ratings are often delayed when they land UK time on a Thursday. I think even the fans who are enthralled by NXT's recent output can't really deny that it's not really succeeded in its aim of beating AEW Dynamite. If you're an investor and you've been told slight whispers or murmurs of the succession plan, this Triple H, this Paul Levesque is going to one day succeed Vince McMahon, and you go, great, what are his credentials? Immediately, that's the first question you'd ask. So you might have heard about NXT, it's our developmental brand. If you're an investor, you're thinking, right, okay, well, that sounds like the minor leagues. Can he level up? And then you see the Wednesday night ratings, and you, as an investor, probably come to the conclusion, no, he can't. You'll look at NXT UK, doomed project, colossal failure. It was designed to galvanize local crowds, and the idea was to replicate it and to create loads of sort of regional home bases with a localized product of which you can be completely proud or whatever, like a sports team. Everyone in the UK thinks it's a total joke of any sort of influence or standing or taste, quite frankly. Triple H, what I'm trying to arrive at here, is never ever been less well perceived in the corporate world and in the fan world as a sort of booker or successor, or as we used to all call him, savior. I think if anything, this strengthens the grip that Vince McMahon wields. 74 years of age, visibly ancient and confused and out of sorts, and there's no one really, if not Triple H, then who? But the problem is, it doesn't look like Triple H.
I think Cedric makes a great point there about investors asking quick questions and wanting quick answers, and they're ones that if you're talking about Triple H's CV at the moment, you simply can't give. We as wrestling fans might be able to delve back into, say, an NXT product that we might have once loved and give some nuanced, articulated retelling of a fabulous story, but that's not the stuff they want to hear. They want to see numbers, they want to see statistics to back things up, things that won't impress them, versus Vince McMahon's legacy of what they'll deem huge success stories. And in your sort of question about transitions, when has WWE ever, from the outside at least, appeared to run that way? They almost seem to revel in the corporate chaos of how they do their business. The day that Vince McMahon let go George Barrios and Michelle Wilson was a shock to the system. Nobody could believe it. The stock price plummeted. But then to listen to a wrestler or to listen to a Triple H in an interview, they just laugh that off as Vince gonna Vince. You always hear about wrestlers saying, oh, when we go on a movie set or when we go on a TV set, we can't believe that we're given reshoots and we're given rereads and we're given trailers and people to help us rehearse with. You get to Raw, you're given your lines, and then you change 10 minutes later. Top to toe, that company seems to operate on this almost ludicrous level of spontaneity that nonetheless just seems to work enough that Vince McMahon wants things to function that way. I don't think they'd want to transition somebody they enjoy throwing people into the deep end and seeing if they sink or swim for a bit. And that's kind of been what Triple H has done for the better part of a decade now, and results are extremely mixed.
From one thing that probably won't change when we all go back to normal to one that probably will. And I don't want to talk about social distancing here and stuff like that. That should be abided to until medically correct to return to some sort of normality. So putting that to one side, Michael Hamflett, how will the live experience of wrestling change? Because I for one, think a lot of wrestling fans, and I include myself in here, got quite complacent with the live experience of wrestling. But the fact we haven't had it for so long, not just as fans watching TV, but also attending, do you think that might cause us a surge in a return? I don't want to really talk about lapsed fans here just yet, but in terms of attendance and appreciation and even reaction, do you think you can see some changes coming?
Oh man, I really hope so. It's hard to be optimistic at the moment, but it's important to try. What you'd like to think is that it's just going to be peak upon peak upon peak. There is, of course, a very significant consideration that people's economic circumstances might have changed, where wrestling is an unnecessary spend in a time where people might not have as much money or might not be as frivolous with their money because they might be worried of something like this happening again, or just all that sort of stuff. But in the nice timeline, where everybody has a little bit of disposable and are able to attend their local town's wrestling show, I would like to think the remaining house shows that still exist are well attended, because there's that sense of euphoria that you get from a live experience, that you get from public gatherings general, wrestling being a very good one. From a television viewing point of view, my God, what it'll be to watch. And we hope this all happens in line. But that first full week, that Raw, Dynamite, NXT, SmackDown, whatever your sort of order is, that whole first week of seeing those guys in front of crowds again for the first time, the pops are going to be so much louder, the boos are going to be so much louder, the heat for the simplest characters, the likes of your Baron Corbins or whoever, is going to be louder than it's ever been. Wrestlers, it'll remind me, but turned up to 11, of what wrestlers used to say about WWE coming to the UK before they killed the town. They said there was nowhere else like it to work, because we as a nation were so starved of that live experience compared to like those spoiled American cities that get it month after month after month, that we feasted on it, and the wrestlers subsequently just fed off it, and their performances were elevated as a result. I've been to some god awful television tapings that were entirely enhanced by a result of a hot crowd, and I just think that will come back globally. The trick then is for the booking to sustain it.
I bloody hope this is the case. There's two timelines, as Hamflett eloquently puts it, that I can see unfolding. And Jesus Christ, I hope the first one I'm about to discuss is the one that we, in fact, live in. I adore going back. I've got this weird thing, me and Hamflett have discussed it. He's incredulous whenever I mention this. And I'm going to mention it now just to see if it's a phenomena that anyone else has experienced. I have this weird thing, right, where because my intelligence has been insulted for so many years by WWE, I've kind of lost a nostalgic fondness for WWE. I still love going back and watching the New Generation and the Golden Era and the Coliseum Video Classics, but there's still something missing in it. A lot of it is the love. I've gone back, despite having never watched it, because I was always a WWF kid, and it was mostly to do with availability. I've gone back and watched mid to late 80s and a lot of crap of the early 90s. So the brilliance and the crap and everything in between of Crockett Promotions and WCW. And I've got this weird nostalgia for this, right? And my favorite thing that drew me into it, like in my 20s, was the reaction to Sting. And not only was it the reaction to Sting, but the fact that he was like 10 times the athlete and worker that Hulk Hogan was. And I'm kind of wishing I was a Sting kid rather than a Hogan kid. But my God, the reaction to Sting. The crowds back then, and it's all sorts of cultural differences to how we've been numbed and desensitized to so much. But the crowds back then are so goddamn earnest in their appreciation of this absolutely class, heroic babyface wrestler. And I would love, in terms of wider culture especially, but in terms of pro wrestling, if we can tap back into that earnestness as an audience and don't shout what, don't ironically chant one number above the referee's count when you're meant to be sort of pouring your heart out over the plight of the babyface. I would love it if they didn't do the 2 count, so detached, like you know the 3 isn't coming. This is very specific to how much I goddamn hate British crowds, but regardless, I just want that earnest 80s atmosphere back. And Jesus Christ, if what's going on now cannot put into perspective, let's just lose ourselves again. I would absolutely love that. The problem is that we are banking on pro wrestling as a collective working in synergy with a black and white version of science of, right, it's over now, everyone back in the arenas. We've seen that there's different rollouts for how this will be tackled between European nations and, in fact, American states. And my worry is that wrestling's already continued in a bastardized form on closed sets while this is like at its peak. My worry is that wrestling being wrestling, the second they're allowed legally, but the ethics are still horrendous to think about when you look down the chain. My worry is that this wonderful moment we're all expecting, where it's finally just about safe enough to go into the arenas and everyone packs them out and every promotion puts on these amazing cards, and then this isn't happening because they'll just rush people into the arenas to make some money for that ailing economy, and it's all tinged and undermined by the fact that, oh, well, people still might die en masse if we do this too early. And you've got this wonderful it's back feeling tempered with that guilt. So, yeah, it could go one of two ways. And my God, I just want to be 4 years old and cheer for Sting and not Hulk Hogan, because Sting turned out to be a nice man and Hulk Hogan's a racist old prick.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you there, Sid. In my head, what I want to see when we get back to normal, let's just say, is the classic sort of opening of Monday Night Raw in the Attitude Era. Oh, but the Attitude Era, where, you know, fireworks go off, we sweep along the front of the crowd. There's signs everywhere. It's a packed house. It's a sellout. But I want that to happen, like you say, once I know medically that that's all right, and I sense that those two things aren't going to gel, and I'm still going to have the experience that I have when I see, you know, on like Dynamite, and I'm not targeting AEW here, but like on Dynamite where they go and greet the 5 wrestlers they've got on the babyface side, go and greet the 5 wrestlers they've got on the heel side, and my brain just can't accept it. Or when you see on Raw or SmackDown or whatever, where there's a 6-man plus the commentators, and my brain's going, that's too many people for my liking. But to talk a little bit more about AEW here, how do you think this whole situation is going to change things for AEW? Because they're obviously on an upward trajectory with the product, at least in my opinion. There we go. Let's get that out of the way. And, you know, there's this anticipation that there may well be a rush back to wrestling because we'll want escapism arguably even more once this situation has passed. Do you think AEW could really get a decent bump from this? And so, you know, they're not going to financially struggle because they've got the same amount of backing, if not more, than what WWE has. So how do you think this is going to affect AEW and what's next for them?
My concern is that they have developed a lot of currency among internet, online, hardcore committed fans, whatever you want to designate them as, purely because they've basically, in my opinion, this is obviously how it came to be. You read that TNT, we're on TNT press release, and this is the action you're going to get. They've done a checklist of, right, this is why I love it. I just think the flex on it's outrageous. They've done a checklist of, right, WWE does this bad, this. They do this rubbish, this bad. And then they've just sought to correct all of that and then create a promotion on the back of it. And I will never not find that funny, right? But the big number one selling point on that is they're the dicks. They're the kind of the evil corporation who insult their fans' intelligence on the regular. Let us be like the good guy promotion, the babyface promotion. It's such an easy thing, and they've squandered a huge amount of that for me. I know for a fact for Hamflet, for a lot of actual, because the fans they are trying to reach are the ones off-put by WWE's dealings with Saudi Arabia, off-put by the idea that they're warehousing talent, and off-put by the fact that they're just top to tail and not particularly nice company. They want to be the nice company, and they've lost a huge amount of that. How much of that matters might not matter, because ultimately a lot of those early promises have gone away. They're not this big sporting presentation. It's not rings. It's not UWFI. It's a New Japan / Mid-South hybrid league, and I think that's fantastic. But it's not sporting to a huge degree. There was all the sense that, oh, they might actually be employees. Nope, independent contractors. So ultimately, they are now, I think, they're not the woke alternative league as they started out. They are simply, and this is not just me, I think this is a consensus pre-revolution, the really good pro wrestling company. And I think that they will be fine on that basis unless tragedy strikes, and they're inviting tragedy.
I think that's a pretty fair take as well. It's that what has happened through all of this is this has almost been like a first test to see if they can, I don't want to use the phrase get away with, but just
No, that's the perfect phrase.
Get away with the tricks that like wrestling has always gotten away with, that Vince McMahon, especially Vince McMahon, has managed to find the grey area of every situation every time and thus get away with it. Like, don't take us seriously until we want you to take us seriously. And in this case, it's like, well, don't take us seriously. We're only pro wrestling, and all of a sudden they can keep running even when they shouldn't. And in this case, I think this was a Twitter question the other day on another one of our podcasts, but there has been a sense that, well, WWE being the brand leader has done something. This was AEW's last kind of chance to be the polar opposite or just slide into that grey area themselves. And that's kind of what they decided to do, because, you know, they may too be beholden to a network that we believe WWE to be. And that's also on the networks for kind of forcing both promotions' hands. But it's ugliness all around. And you wanted, you know, as Cedric points out, you wanted AEW to be progressive and steer away from that ugliness, and they haven't. So instead, what you're left with is to only judge them on product. And I've never not sensed that their core audience are just hugely satisfied. That's very apparent. Like, if you ever online on a Thursday morning, all the conversation, regardless of some NXTs, especially around Christmas time, that I would have defended to the hilt, were miles better than Dynamite. The conversation was still around Dynamite. The fans were extremely satisfied, and that's very nice to see as well. Like, it's great to see a wrestling product just earnestly satisfying fans. Often, even as somebody that enjoys watching WWE or NXT, you sometimes have to try to find the things, whereas Dynamite was just mainlining excitement right into the fans' veins. My thing coming out of this is just how much will they continue to feel like the secondary wrestling concern, because it's still really tricky to work out what people think of AEW outside the bubble. Their numbers before all this collapsed, and in that outstanding run they had of television shows where the numbers are creeping back up, you sensed, I was saying it on podcasts for weeks, I sensed that Wednesday night would do better than Monday Night Raw by the end of 2020, because I fancied AEW to get into that 1.2 million range. I didn't think NXT would go off a cliff, and I saw 1 million in their future. And I just wonder now, coming out the other side of that, how much this will lump AEW in with pro wrestling, and they'll get trapped under WWE's thumb a little bit with the mainstream audience, not with the hardcores. I'm absolutely not comparing quality of product. I'm comparing perception to a mainstream audience.
I'm glad to agree. The lapsed fans, which we're going to get onto in a second, and the friends of mine who aren't even wrestling fans, you still had to, you know, work hard to try and explain it to them, even though I was shoving Pac versus Orange Cassidy down their throats like there was no tomorrow. From two promotions that are going to be absolutely fine, Michael Hamflett, to the independent circuit and indie wrestlers, that's arguably the biggest unknown, isn't it, right now?
Yeah, it's where it's just desperately sad all around. It's worth sort of remembering that the events around WrestleMania weekend that were cancelled, and we heard sort of some of the awful stories of promoters losing their money, losing their houses, losing their livelihoods through those biggest indie shows of the year that could no longer run, and money that they weren't going to get back, that they'd already had to pay out. That kind of extends to everything that's happening now. April has been the longest month. I can't believe it's only been a month pretty much since WrestleMania was due to take place. But think of every weekend that's been lost to those shows. Think about in the hot markets where they're running shows in the week. That was something that wrestlers very proudly were able to say, I can't believe I get to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as well as Saturday, because whilst I think we probably passed the indie boom that kind of helped create ultimately the thirst and part of AEW, there was still a sizable portion of wrestlers getting work. Some of the AEW roster was still out working. I was due to go to an indie show in the UK featuring Orange Cassidy. There was still a great deal of malleability and flexibility, and I do significantly worry for the status of the independent wrestlers that currently are getting work, that have now found their pro wrestling tees coffers perhaps decimated by some ex-WWE talent that now want to be making money while they can't wrestle too. Talent pool has been flooded, but there's nowhere for any of them to work. So if and when these shows come back, will a promoter be looking at promoting an unknown that's got the best dropkick in the world that nobody's seen, or will they be looking to bring in Zack Ryder, because it's going to be really interesting to see if Matt Cardona can draw in this new version of his character? That's not to criticize Zack Ryder or any of those ex-WWE guys wanting an opportunity. It's just that the landscape of it has shifted in so many ways. I feel genuine concern for promoters and wrestlers alike.
Yeah, for me, I can't see the scenario I'm about to pitch manifesting, because it's professional wrestling and these things are rule-proving exceptions or aberrations or however you want to call them. But it would be lovely if, for example, your GCWs and your Beyond Wrestlings and various other more prominent North American indies of any renown would band together once all of this has happened and there's a huge appetite to see live wrestling. I know obviously we have to make sensitive economic considerations to how big these shows can even be anymore. If you look at the unemployment figures in America, they are so goddamn depressing. My heart genuinely goes out for all of the workers affected by that. But ultimately, if independent wrestling wants to really get back on the map, they should, in my opinion, really go towards co-promoting a show. If they say there's a set target, right, in 2 months we can do large public gatherings if we do X, Y, and Z. Book a 5,000 seat arena. I would have pitched 10,000 if the fact that the economy wasn't in complete collapse. 5,000 seater arena, and every single independent promotion of renown who are really going to struggle can put all of their iconography and logos all across it and say, this is us, we're back, please, please, please support us when we go back to our new normal. This is a one-off celebration. You can subscribe to our on-demand service here, there. Our talent that you're going to watch tonight, you can see them on Pro Wrestling Tees. You can buy their merchandise. I just think it will benefit hugely from a big marketed joint huge event to get them back in the conversation. Because if in fact collectively Europe or America just goes, right, it's happening, the lack of money available among the consumer, they're just going to go to the familiar, and that's where independent wrestling is going to struggle big time.
I think that's a really wonderful idea, and I would add to it to take a David Starr and have him be front and center of it, to put him in the main event, because
yes,
I know he's a divisive figure in some circles, but the fact he's divisive is to me what makes like the capitalistic control of WWE, and to a lesser extent AEW, so gross in the first place, and never in favor of wrestlers themselves. He takes criticism for people daring to think that what he's doing is part of some sort of gimmick to flog t-shirts. Well, he'd probably just go and get work somewhere and not be blacklisted if that was the case. He is a guy that like genuinely fights when others don't feel like they've got the voice or the confidence or the status to do so. And with him at the front of that, it would send the right message, as Cedric points out, to the potential consumers that these are the right companies and the right wrestlers to invest in, and they just need it more.
Finally, Michael Sidgwick, we've seen all these terrible figures across the board, really, for wrestling due to the current situation. Do you think these lapsed fans will ever return?
It's hard to gauge, because wrestling's the only thing that's doing anything. Like Hollywood shut down, NBA shut down, whichever American sports go on at this time of year shut down. Premier League football, League One, European football, shut down. Everything's going to get postponed indefinitely. That was originally scheduled to appear. So realistically, there's no comparative data to alert us to the idea of, well, is it just the setting that everyone absolutely hates? Say if the NBA was going on behind closed doors, I'd be curious to know what the ratings are there. Is it just the fact that these are sort of skeleton crews and then the big stars aren't there? Like Chris Jericho hasn't wrestled on Dynamite, Kevin Owens hasn't been on Raw. Obviously, you get that dip after WrestleMania anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I think that, yes, the people who aren't watching it now are probably not watching it not as a reflection of the quality of the shows, but the fact that they're just soulless, horrendous bastardizations of what pro wrestling is. Ultimately, I think that AEW couldn't get the lapsed fans from 2015, when there's like at least 2 to 3 million if you look at those raw numbers. But I think this is completely different. I think it's just people who can't be bothered with it ethically or in terms of the quality. I don't think it's a big flashpoint of, Triple H is your world heavyweight champion. He's rubbish, right? I'm never watching this again. I think there's a special set of circumstances that people will accept, and I think when the crowds come back, they will too.
I don't know. You know, I think they will go up. They will absolutely go up. Every Raw, SmackDown, and Wednesday night number will increase, but I'm not sure as to what percentage. With WWE specifically, less so AEW, but certainly with WWE, it felt like something was going to come along that was going to be like cold water in the face of a lot of habitual viewers. And unfortunately, it's turned out to be like a global health crisis instead of something about the product specifically. But we've seen before, if you look at the demographics of an NXT, how much habit factors into a lot of people that watch that product on television as it's airing, tolerating commercials end to end. And I wonder if this thing that has pulled certain select numbers of viewers away, whether it be live news or whether it be some of the things that Cedric's highlighted there, just to not really want to watch it because it doesn't feel very nice at the moment. It's easy to fall out with a habit. It's easy if you manage to last 3 or 4 weeks wondering what Baron Corbin's been up to, then you might not want to go back and find out ever again. And I genuinely think it will take old-fashioned things to pull them back. It will take. So if you're a fan, if you're person A and person B is your friend who you used to watch wrestling with that has just given up during this time, and then you say to them, "Oh, you're going to watch Raw this week? The crowds are back. I wonder what Baron Corbin's going to do." I'm not sure that's enough if they've gone a few months and they're just not bothered. It might take a really interesting storyline. It might take something akin to Kofi Mania, where there is something happening that you tell your friend that they're going to have to tune in because you can't miss this thing. I would like that. Sounds optimistic because what I'm saying is that good booking needs to bring viewers back, and that's all we've been saying for years and years and years. But these are different circumstances. I think in order to remind people why they got into the habit of wrestling in the first place, it might actually take a good wrestling show.
We are discussing unprecedented things, obviously, but we are kind of discussing it here along the lines or on the basis of they're going to craft something that's going to intensify or get concluded at the dawn, the precipice of these new live shows, whenever they might be. That's absolutely not going to be the case. Like, absolutely not. There's not going to be, oh, well, is it going to be like the sort of the culmination of Dejanette's story on Raw that's been unfolding across April, May, June, and July? Absolutely not. They are going to treat WWE the first time they get a significant number of fans in an arena. And they might have to do this weird sort of 3 seats vacant, 1 person, 3 seats vacant for social distancing. That's what they might have to do. So the atmosphere is going to get lost, but will that relatively matter compared to the silence? Who knows? They're going to put a Hell in a Cell match on the very first Raw. They're going to get Brock Lesnar to do a match, and then they're going to do a huge angle that's going to hook you into next week. It might not be very good because it's WWE, but that's the plan. They're going to do a huge match. Absolutely no build. They don't need one. They can just do it as if, oh, it's Triple H and Randy Orton are going to wrestle because it's in Saudi Arabia, except with actual stars, not Triple H and Randy Orton. They are going to do, on that very first week back, they're going to feel like some of the most special shows of all time, AEW, WWE, NXT, if in fact they're all coordinated. You're going to get at least two gigantic matches on each show, and each show is going to run an absolutely enormous angle, what they perceive to be an enormous angle anyway. It's going to be a reset of everything when these shows have finally got fans in, and that is going to, in addition to the hype and the anticipation and the relief, everything's going to be okay. And if it's not, I've dedicated my life to what? This thing that's going to die. Fantastic.
And on that note, I think we'll leave it there. Do let us know your thoughts on how you think wrestling is going to change forever this year in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Actually, follow all 3 of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
Sidgwick.
Follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all at WhatCultureWWE. As I said, this has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dadley Boys. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.